Hi, it's Tuesday, the 23rd of November, 2021, and I'm continuing my Blue Storm videos. So today we are here on day 6, yellow seed. Yellow seed planet is Jupiter, and so mastery as a fourth mind sign, mastering the seed, the mask, in psychology terms, mastering our conditioned mindset, our fear, the coping mechanisms that we've used in order to survive, often in narcissistic relationships, often in relationships where we are disempowered, there's a power imbalance going on. And so we can't be in full truth because we'd lose our job, we'd lose our home, we'd lose our friends, etc. That sort of energy. So as it's the fourth, it's the structure. It's around becoming self-existing. So this template in its pure form is where we're heading towards in our human evolution. So all of these cycles reoccur, mind signs, every 20 days. And so 20 days ago, you think what we're doing like just around 3 weeks ago, then this was a portal day and it was resonance seed. So it was 20 days ago, what were you focusing on around your mask, literally, figuratively? What did you have to do to compromise yourself in some way using a coping mechanism, an ego coping mechanism? And remember, this whole thing is about maturation of the ego. So being Venus-based, coming into the divine child transparency. So more of that later on. So we're 20 days on, and we're now coming into balance with what happened here, of course, and all these other previous ones, how we're becoming self-existing. Remember, on the 13-year cycle, we're in year 3 of that, and it's yellow electric seed. So we're focusing on the mask. Now, if you look at what's going on planet Earth, it's all there to be seen around mask wearing on lots of different levels. And basically, yellow seed being star seed, which means we're embodying our true nature, it's the antithesis of red moon if we are being our authentic selves, I got my words out today, and shining our light, being in truth. And that's what this time is really about. That's what's coming to light, this shift now. And actually, when we go into critical thinking, logical thinking, it's a very different position. So when you actually critically analyze factual information rather than propaganda, rather than going into your emotional mind and your fear, and you actually sit down with yourself after the storm and you think, what was that all about? That's totally irrational. It doesn't make sense. You know, it's disproportionate. It's madness on a lot of levels. You know, it doesn't make any sense why I behaved, why I was so emotional in that particular instance. But once you start to really understand the emotional mind, which is what Blue Storm is all about, transformation of the emotional mind, then it does become very clear as to why human beings behave from this emotional space. And of course, this is all the spiritual teachings in whatever form they take in every culture. And that's really what I'm going to focus on primarily in this video, is discussing that and this Taurus full moon and what it actually means with this axis at this time. So remember, in terms of the last 260-day cycle we were in, it was in Sagittarius. and it began in December. So think back to that time last year where you were going through that spin cycle and everything that was happening for you then in the lead up to Christmas. And so, for example, in the UK, there was all these lockdowns that were talked about that were going on. And again, you know, that same story is coming out now in different formats. Only now, you know, all this time on, we're in a very different space. We're now in the Virgo 260-day cycle that began here on the 1st of September. And so we're going into what are our fears, what is the mindset, and what are we completing now in these eclipses, which are coming to the end of the North Node being in Gemini, which is right relationship really around thoughts, beliefs, that are coming from mindset. Whereas the opposite axis of that is Sagittarius, which comes from experiential knowledge. And of course, when we're young on the planet, we don't have a lot of experience in this particular role of human being that we're playing out. Once we start to really access our higher self and our spiritual self, we can gain insight and guidance. But again, experientially in a body sense, we haven't actually done it. Often people can be very manipulated through fear when they're young because they haven't yet had time to develop experience and wisdom of going around the block a few times, which of course when you're older and you've seen different things rolling out from people in power over many years and you've experienced them at work, you've experienced them in relationship, you've experienced them with food. For some people, you know, that's light bulb moments of saying, hang on, you know, this just doesn't add up, what I'm being told. This goes against my wisdom, against my experience and being an elder. And of course, our culture, generally speaking in the West, doesn't really focus on that wisdom, doesn't really focus on the elder and being in sync with patterns and cycles, because we're living in a Gregorian calendar frame. And we're now at the maximum edge of the spiral of the patriarchy with Pluto in Capricorn at 26 degrees. So big things coming down the line, and very handy when you start to know your own codes and your own patterns and you really start to heal them, because this is what this 13-day cycle is all about. So up to now, you've had the full moon and you have had we're in the 6th day of this cycle. And tomorrow we go into Red Resonant Serpent, which is my mum's, my own sign. And again, I've had amazing synchronicity because I met somebody at the weekend. And yeah, it was just really, really interesting chatting with this lady. And I love it when this happens because I met her for the first time. And of course, this is her Wavespell. And she's got the same mind sign as my mum. So, you know, what are the chances of that? Pretty high numbers on that, I think. So tomorrow we'll go into the 7th day, and whenever we go into the 7th day, we're seeing what is resonating. It's the highest point of the pyramid in terms of the Mayan construct. So we're at the top of the pyramid. We're seeing what's happened in the previous 6 days. See what is resonating with where your energy is flowing, where you feel joyful, where you feel magic happening, where you're resonating with people and truth. Truth is it in your tribe. It's not a subjective truth, you know, it's what is right. And this is the key to the process that we're in. So whatever process you're doing, you know, whether it's meditation, whether it's with an Eastern philosophy, whether it's with a Western philosophy, a New Age, whatever you want to call it, they all have a core structure there, because that is the source code. And the source code really is about the blue storm process. So if you think of blue storm as your mind, your conditioning, the way that you are sometimes out in the world, and especially if you're an empath, and I know a lot of people watching these videos and who I connect to, again, very small group of people who are doing this sort of evolution work. Often the way that empaths work, as in very sensitive people who pick up on other people's feelings, this is part of the Taurus Scorpio dynamic as well, of power that we're in, often enablers. If you don't know any of these terms, then please check them out, Google them. There's loads of information around narcissistic relationship. So often growing up in a family where a person didn't really do their feelings, that's the key. And that's the big power play going on now. Don't do their feelings, don't heal, insist on a very strong mindset, which isn't in alignment with truth, which is about often bullying, aggressive behavior, being very moody, not being grounded, not being connected to their source energy, in a storm scenario. So again, with the narcissist pattern, it's about often walking on eggshells because you're afraid to trigger that person, and as a child, of course, you don't know the terminology, but you know what happens if you touch a sore spot of that person. And it becomes more and more difficult because that circle of the narcissist just gets stronger in energy and smaller, to the point where, because they're not healing and because they're not going through their personal evolution, they are devolving. And this is a pattern for people, for human beings. We all come in with challenges. That's why we're here. We're coming in to create amazing change and shift through learning about ourselves and how we work. This is what Blue Hand is all about, which is the 9th gateway point and my mind sign that's coming up in a couple of days after. And so the more that we learn about how we work, we realize that our primary driver is the emotional mind, because if we don't feel good, then we give up hope, we become sick, and ultimately we die. So our emotional mind is designed to keep us safe. It's a fight, flight, freeze, fawn perspective that is showing us all the time where we've got trauma. It's showing us all the time, this is not good for you. Now, that isn't always true. It just means there may have been a childhood event that happened that we haven't cleared, so we're still living from it, because that's how the amygdala works. So again, do your research on the amygdala emotional freedom technique, which I've been using for, I'm in my 14th year of that now, and changed my life, because I was very sensitive. I was often very affected by other people's behaviour, in particular my partner, my parents, at work. If I felt emotionally challenged, I really struggled to function. And on the one hand, that's a great thing, because that's showing you authentically what behaviour, if you're being bullied, if you're being at the behest of somebody else's emotional storms, that is very disempowering, and you have no control over it or them. We all try and control the environments and situations, and I can see how I've inherited lots of coping mechanisms from my parents and grandparents around this, and over time learned how to heal those triggers. And in doing so, once you do that, it changes your holograph. So this is a key thing. So again, using a meditation framework. So if you realize that you want to be moving towards a happy place all the time, and when you learn how to meditate, or again, maybe not in a traditional way. Maybe you have a happy place that you go to. So one place for me was like going in my garden or going in my allotment, away from the triggers, into nature, and really creating things there away from other people and other spaces where I didn't feel creative or safe or loving. That on its own, though, can just be an avoidance. So doing that, but as well as healing these. So when EFT came into my awareness, then I started really working on myself, and then I started to move away from a codependent relationship where I was dependent on somebody else being in a good space. Everything started to move for me then. And so for each of us, we can become more empowered. We start to heal. We recognize our sovereignty and our self-worth. We realize we don't have to keep living these dramas anymore. We don't have to keep giving our power to people who basically, this is the Wizard of Oz story. This is what we're seeing on the planet, is smoke and mirrors, and people who are very skilled at pushing people's buttons, very skilled at mind control, at creating very powerful media that really touches people in a fear manipulative way. And so to use the meditation model, so we go into a space every day and we start to really emphasize the watcher in us, the observer in us, the witness position. So whenever we are having a trigger moment, for example, or we're having a dialogue, we're having an inner dialogue with ourselves, one of our many voices, we all talk to ourselves. And of course, at one time, nobody would have admitted that, because that would have meant you were mentally ill. That was the viewpoint years ago. And for some people, it still is. But that part of you, rather than say it's a person, that part of you that is the watcher, that's watching you doing behaviors, that's having some sort of dialogue with you, saying, what are you doing that for? Or that part of you that's away, not in the behavior that's going on. So that fear part of you that's running around like a headless chicken, or eventually doing meditation over time can train the mind to just still do its thing in whatever, and it's different, it's unique for each person doing this process. Just become an observer of the thoughts that are going on and just let them carry on, but not take them on, not get involved with them. And gradually, as we do this process, a space starts to open up within us where, because we're doing this process, we're allowing that part of us, the higher self, the divine spirit, whatever you call that, the God and Goddess in us, incarnate, that is on board in this holy grail, the yellow human, and wanting to guide us, wanting to teach us, but can only do so much depending on the mind and all the other stuff going on, conditioned mindset, the belief system, all of this stuff, and of course, the emotional mind. So when we start to learn and imagine that we can eventually get to a really serene space no matter what's going on. So when we keep our head, when all around everyone else is losing theirs. This is not a mind situation. It's not an intellectual way of being. It's about getting clear about who we really are and adopting habits and systems that really allow us to remember this aspect of ourselves beyond the human being story. So doing meditation is proven to balance the brain, change the brain signals, to increase an understanding of how we are in the world but not of it. And there's no religion attached to this. It's simply coming back into knowing who we really are and connecting and disconnecting from anything that isn't true. When we combine this with our mindset and our triggers and our thoughts using a system like emotional freedom technique, then we start to recognize, so instead of watching things go, the thoughts go past, the triggers, instead of just breathing through them, which works on one level, instead of not acting upon them, which also works, all of these are different stages. Once we actually get the trigger thought, feel it, instead of, it's the thoughts that are running around like headless chickens. And often it's because that person hasn't yet learned a system that allows them to be empowered by feeling what those thoughts are bringing. So, it's remembering that we put meaning onto things because of our experiences, because of our parents' experiences, because of belief systems that we've taken on. And of course, all of these are in the past. And our emotional mind wants to keep things that keep us safe. They may not be for our highest good. They may be totally focused on an individual event that happened 50 years ago, that we are still running that program. And so emotional freedom technique is that it helps us work with these triggers, helps us unlock what they're connected to in the past, helps us very dynamically, very quickly work with these, and then we can start to really change how we look at the world, because we're starting to get clear. And as I talked about in the last video, 13 clear signs. The clear sign of blue solar hand is my mind sign. And so again, my passion and my focus is about showing systems shape our destiny through healing. That's what blue hand is all about. It's the 7th Mayan sign, so it is about the mystic. It is about learning what resonates with truth, so we can start to get clear of this old conditioning, get clear of the fear. That's the most important thing, and be in the center, be in our center, be in our heart center, rather than up here. Because it is all about love. It is all about healing whenever we haven't felt loved, whenever we felt judged, whenever we felt criticized. Again, with Virgo, very much this energy of the critical mind, the critical mindset of generations that have come before that believed being strict with young people, being critical of them, focusing on what they're doing wrong rather than what they're doing right. Doesn't feel loving, all of that behavior. And of course, again, we get belief systems around, I'll give you some critical feedback, you need to hear this. But again, the energy that comes with that and the emotion that comes with that often is not coming from a person who is in a healed space or healing space. We're all a work in progress, of course. And so it's the emotion, it's the vibration of that we feel, and we're getting mixed messages all the time. So the great news is there are tools out there are systems out there, if you're not already using them, that show you where your triggers came from and how you can heal them. And so in this Gemini Sagittarius time, this week in particular, we are going through an eclipse shift. So we had the first eclipse with the full moon when this wave spell began, actually on the second day, which was yellow when the sun showed us where we're still running an old storyline, an old narrative based on who I believe I am. And so if you think back to around 2011 to 2013, because this is when this North Node, and the North Node is a spiritual story. So what North Node experience were you having back then? What did you believe about yourself? This was a time when there was a big event on September the 9th, 2001, where we had a huge shift in how people could move around on the planet and what stories were being put out at that time that greatly influenced people, and specifically focusing on terror. And so remember who you were back then, what was initiating for you. And now, as we're going through this, we've got another eclipse coming up on the 4th. We've got the solar eclipse coming up. And the moon is going to be at 12 degrees. So we've got a lot of full moon energy going on at 27. We've got new moon, 12 degrees. And again, look at the patterns over the past few months and going forward as well. And you can see the divine structure there shifting us into a different space. So number 12, of course, in the Mayan is yellow human. And it's what we need to look at in order to get crystal clear about who we really are as a human being, so we can live a loving, happy, joyful life. And of course, there's got to be huge shifts on the planet in order for this future vision to come in, but it begins with us right here, right now. And at the moment, we're in Cancer moon, and so we're focusing on the home, on the mother, on the summer solstice. So it can feel very emotional, and a lot of mother stories can be coming up over today, yesterday as well. And I really want to talk about yesterday as well, because yesterday was mastery of the conscious dreamer. So what did you do yesterday? So that's Monday, the 22nd of November, 2021. Of course, we're in America. There is Thanksgiving week, and that's going to be on Thursday, where we're integrating White World Bridger. So a very, very powerful week to really get to grips with where you are as to your personal center, what takes you out of it. You need to be recording this information, get yourself a book of shadows. I call this, and this is what I use to work with myself and my clients, is you need a manual for yourself so that you know you've got this over time. It's a super powerful journal process that you can use so that every time you're coming around these cycles, these 9-month cycles, you can focus on, okay, what was I doing last time? And of course, these core issues do not change. So yesterday, when the moon was in Cancer, what did you do that you really loved? What was going on at home? What was going on with the feminine? Maybe you took a trip down to the sea, and very much Cancer energy. What do you really value? What really works for you? We're all unique, you know, so we have shared things, of course, in common around being loved, being respected, being in our sovereignty, feeling safe, having access to clean water, good food, a lot of very basic things that we have in a shared sense. But depending on your cosmic code, you may have different strengths around. For example, you may not like going to the beach, you may not like the sun, you might like the shade, you might be attracted to this time of year rather than summer. All of these really connect on a deep level to your star code, and the more that you can start to understand about that, the more you can start to understand about yourself. And yourself is the most important focus, because we are all this amazing soul energy, and we're all in little pockets of it. So if you just imagine this amazing conscious being is just being incarnated into key players, and we're all key players, there's no hierarchy. We all have to experience different things in different ways. And so in order for us to see the bigger picture, everybody's journey is important. And at the same time, not getting invested in other people's stories or trying to people please, trying to help them in a way that you may not yet recognize. Often people doing healing modalities, they get lost in this and they lose the truth that each person can heal themselves. Any person who is working in a healing modality is a facilitator, and that's so important to remember and recognize that, and not get lost on the ego trip of I'm going to heal the world, because that is an ego trip. So often these lessons are hard for the emotional mind and the compassionate part of ourselves. But as we go through this process, we realize that we don't do anybody any favors by trying to live their journey for them. We can share information, we can share resources, and it's that person's responsibility to actually do their own process. Now, that's what this time is about. This is the shift into the age of Aquarius. So, over to just mention the divinity codes at that point. So, the divine child, blue monkey, the 11th mind sign, is about the part of us that's really wanting to heal and become transparent. And so when we become transparent, we are not childish, we're childlike. We're not doing childish behavior. We're not being a brat, for example. We're taking responsibility for ourselves and doing whatever we need to do to let go of this story that we came in with that has hurt us in some way. And everyone has been hurt in some way. I offer you that, because it's simply the times that we're in. We haven't yet reached a point of realization around how to parent, and anybody who is a parent who is wanting to be the best parent that they can and facilitate their children's journey in the world knows how difficult that is. That was a key thing for me to go into psychology, to try and understand that. So I could create a really good upbringing for my children and minimize the wounding. And of course, now I have a dialogue with them about that at times. So when they feel ready to talk to me about things, so that I can apologize a lot of the time for the mistakes that I made, and honor that that was their experience, even though that wasn't my intention. That is so important now. So this is in the form of a lock and a key. And again, I'm not going to go into reading it all out for you. It's a lens. And There we go. So you can stop the video. So in this process, this 13-day process, we go from blue storm to blue cosmic monkey. And of course, now we're in Sagittarius energy as well. So on Sunday, last Sunday, we went into Sagittarius. And again, this was a synchronicity that I immediately met Sagittarius lady. So this is so fun, you know, because the more you get into understanding cosmic codes and start doing them, then the more you understand who's coming into your life and gives you a different conscious awareness. And if you want to work on this level around understanding your patterns and your codes and your cycles, this is essential to know. Okay, so I'm in my 11th year of working with this energy, and I'm not doing it in a patriarchal way. I'm learning what I need to each day. And I offer you, this is what we're getting back into. It's remembering, it's going with the flow, it's understanding what's channeling each day through the universe. And that's what the Mayan Wavespell gives you on a really deep level, more than anything else that I've come across, even astrology. So, but I'm not at a fantastic level of astrology like some people are. So they probably know different ways of interpreting it. But it is endless, this, and I love that. It's limitless, because we are limitless. Okay, so we've got the Eon, and that is number 20, which ties in with the 20th Mayan sign, which is yellow sun. So the more that we get clear, the more that we can connect to source code, the more we can connect to who we really are. And this is a shift. So again, I'll put a link there for the Eon. And another of my favorite books is so the message for that is there at the bottom. Okay, no matter how qualified or deserving you are, you will never reach a better life until you can imagine it for yourself and allow yourself to have it. Now, in terms of people who are watching all this media and have been watching it for a long time, I think it's good to dip in and out of things at the moment, just to see what's going on briefly, and then most of the time to really immerse ourselves in uplifting, positive, joyous things, you know, what we want to create more of, but not in terms of being in la la land either, you know. And I know that we can really feel this resonance of what's going on at this huge rebirth of humanity. So, and, you know, not denying that either. It's like really trying to come into balance. And the majority of the time, if you're in a wintry place at the moment, you're not getting a lot of sunshine, you're not getting a lot of warmth, you know, I think it's so important to resource yourself and not go into too much darkness, because all the things that are going on the darker level are designed to target to bring people down in resonance. So we want our vibe to go up. We want to be putting into ourselves on every level powerful resources in food, vitamins, information, loving people, loving environments, positivity. And at this time of year, it's always key to remember this is the rest cycle in the Northern Hemisphere. This is a time when we work within and we make sure that we don't overdo it, because remember, on the 3D American dream wheel, we are focusing all the time 24/7, work, 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 make more money, etc. And that is just going to deplete us. I mean, it is really common sense, isn't it? You know, that historically thousands of years ago. And in, you know, in some cases in indigenous places, even today, they recognize the value of, you have 6 months full on, you have 6 months full off. And that's when you're at your maximum energy capacity. As you get older, you have to recognize your human body limits. And often our human body limits are limited because we've done things earlier on in life to excess. You know, we've got repetitive strain injury, we've got all sorts of mental energy drainers going on now because of things that we've used that don't sit well with the human psyche and cause all sorts of spectrums. And, you know, this is really coming through with younger children as well, around how they are embodying what has come through on a genetic level from all of the ancestors. So in particular, Asperger's as well, things like that, around just not being able to tolerate emotional drama, for example. So there are always gifts in all of these things. There are all these amazing learnings around what creates an adaptation in human beings. And all these things are adaptations. And it's looking at, okay, so what can we start to do that creates an amazing journey for human beings? What do we need? Because we know a lot of what we don't need now. So just to continue the recording, just had a little pause there. And so talking about the dynamic with the Taurus and Scorpio. So it's the second dynamic, and the first being the Aries and the Libra. So in psychological terms, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and it's the hero, it's the warrior, it's the ego, basically, and it's ruled by Mars. And then we have the opposite axis. So if you look at what I call the natural zodiac, so you have the first house is Aries, it's the spring equinox. And then the opposite of that is the seventh house, which is Libra, which is the autumn equinox. So these signs, if you are one of these signs, or you have this strategically in your natal chart, then this shows where you're doing the hero, heroine's journey and the narrative around that, what you've come here to do. And if you have Libra, this is how the opposite at that time of year, the shadow side, how we do we rather than I, how we come together and do relationship, and how we've learned how to do relationship through the experiences that we've had when we were a child, and also on a genetic level. So again, our environment and our nurturing our nature, and on a genetic level, all of that, that is that first and seventh axis. And so astrology is so much more than just getting a horoscope. You know, it's understanding the cosmos, it's understanding our part in it, and how amazing our chart is and how it can help us navigate through our life. It shows everything in there. So we've got Chiron in Aries at the moment for a long transit, and this came in 2018. And we can see how this has amped up into a huge process now. Who am I? What is my story? And how that is very much shifting this week around my story is coming first now, because we've been placed in a position where we're told about the survival story and what we have to do to survive. And this, of course, is the Scorpio and Taurus axis. And this is now coming in. So the north nodes go backwards. So hence we're going from Gemini and Sagittarius into Taurus and Scorpio. And then the next one after that will be Aries and Libra. And this will also match in with some huge cycles historically on the planet around what has happened in the past, around civil wars and human evolution, what that's allowed to happen. And that's what we can look at in the bigger picture. The Taurus axis Taurus is the second house. So again, if you relate this to the Mayan calendar, so the first house, sign number 1 is Red Dragon. What is my story? And for most of us, this is what is my survival story. I would say that for all of us, really, for every human being, although for some people this feels more like a survival story now because of what some people are doing in a position of power. But they're all survival stories, really, on some level. And how we start to really change this through our own personal healing and understanding and stop doing this old narrative. So this is what Red Dragon brings for us, is our conscious evolution, the return to balance of the sacred feminine. And so in order for us to live the life that we live now, it's so out of balance, isn't it? I was just, as I've just stopped this recording because I had to do something else. Again, that's very much for many women a different pattern around having to do, we're called multitaskers, you know, but we cannot do things simultaneously. Well, it's, you know, it's impossible. We tend to have several different things going on at once. And again, often that's not in our best interest because it causes a pattern interrupt, it causes an inability to focus, to concentrate sometimes, an ability to invest energy in a channeled focus way at times, and only at times in our life, like for example, when we don't have children, when we need to look after them, when we need to look after people who are sick, people who are elderly as well. So historically, women have had largely that role over thousands of years. And as a result of that, trying to become empowered and to, you know, earn money, etc., has meant going into a false reality where you go and work at a place of work, whether it's in your home, you know, you devote, as most men do, to a certain number of hours in the office. When you come home, what time do you have left to be with your family? Just look at this dynamic that's going on. All of these hours working in a different place for somebody else in order to buy a home, in order to have money, in order for somebody else to come and clean your home, you know, if you're affluent, rather than you being it yourself. Somebody else to look after your children rather than you look after them yourself. So you don't have any bond with your children, you know, when they're out all the time. And where is this going? All of this cycle of not being at home and not being with family and not being with our elders, you know, and all of this breaking down. So looking at these patterns is so key now, and going back into balance with this. So we've got mind, body, and spirit in balance. We've got being in the home. Home is where all the patterns are created. So to go back to Taurus, Taurus is about step 2, which again in the Mayan is white wind, the new learning coming in. It is about new learning, the second house. It can be about money, it can be about power dynamic, it can be about what is manifest based on what happens in house number 1 around our story. And again, if you relate each of these houses to a year in the life of So when the ego is being developed, so year 1, we are starting to realise that we're a separate entity from our mum and other people. And by the time we're getting into the 2s, as anybody who's had a 2-year-old will know, can often be a power play around who am I and who are you, and I want to do this, and why are you not letting me do that? So again, if we look at human development there around the power struggle and what that manifests for us, how we're parented, what environment we're in, whether we're allowed to play freely, whether our house is messy or it's tidy, or whether we are allowed to be messy and tidy, all of these sorts of things. And of course, lots of psychological studies have gone in depth with studying this, and we can see that manifest now with controls that are in place. So each person has a pattern, they have a role to play because of their incarnation, and this is how you can learn more and more about this. In relationships, in terms of Aries and Libra, so our family just keeps showing up for us, our caretakers, our ancestral story, until we really get it and understand it and work with the gifts, work with the shadow story to heal it, let it go, really start to blossom as a starseed and come into our full potentiality. And so with Scorpio, this is about survival. And so this is the circle, before life, after life as well, the cell, the egg, all of that dynamic, and tying in with the Mayan, again, at Scorpio time of the year, when it's what we call Halloween. This is when the Pleiades are in a really, really strong position, the 7 sisters. And again, so just Google information about that information, those constellations, and Isis, for example, energy, it is what it is. Look at all the different goddess hierarchies as well. So this is going back before the patriarchy, when women were celebrated as the true vehicle that they are, the gateway of life, that they give life through them, literally. And so using that metaphor, we are really focusing on what is my personal gateway. This is Red Skywalker. This is the 13th step, the shift step. How do I create heaven on earth through me? This is the 52-day cycle that we are in. And so based on what has come before, beginning on the 1st of September, where we're shown our survival issues. So Libra energy is connected to Venus, of course, and so is Taurus. And Scorpio is connected to Pluto. And so again, look at these energies as the next stage of the initiation of going from the 1-year-old to a 2-year-old, and the access around power. So as we're growing up, are we allowed freedom? It's a power dynamic. So any pattern that was created in our childhood around giving and receiving, where are parents present, for example, were they emotionally centered? Were they emotionally grounded? Did they have good parenting? How did they know how to be a parent? How did they parent us? And in all of those things that I've just talked about to do with our model in society, in Western society, around how we nurture, or rather don't nurture our children, how we don't nurture ourselves, how we don't revere ourselves and our sacredness and our sovereignty. All of that has gone. I'm going to be sharing more information about this around what's coming up in the next 52 days, because we're going to be going into the relationship big time, as I've talked about in the last video, with red serpents and the Akashic record. So again, tune into that big time tomorrow around what is resonating for you then in relationship, what issues are coming up, what are you still playing out. Because when we go into this North Node in January the 18th, this is going to be a key focus. We're going to the next level now. So again, if you think back on a personal level, what was going on for you in 2001 till 2003, that gave you the basis for your story, where you were, that back then, the narrative, what you believed about yourself, because Sagittarius is really about what beliefs do we have based on what we think and how we relate, how we co-create to other people. Gemini being the third sign of the zodiac. And so again, when we're around 3, we start to really form different relationships. So look back then at what was going on, and then what was manifest because of that. So in that next 18-month cycle, what was manifest for you based on that? What was the power dynamic going on for you back then? Where were you maybe struggling to be in your sovereignty? Where were you trying to cope with some narcissistic pattern going on? And how did you manage your life situation then? Because you're going to be revisiting that starting in January and going to the next level. Remember, this is always going to the next level by going within and healing more and raising our conscious awareness, and most importantly, healing it. Healing the heart dynamic. So what have we got this week that is huge? So as I talked about today, we're in Cancer Moon, and we've also got the Sun is crossing the South Node in Sagittarius. So if you allow it, your pain story can be over to a larger extent. If you are coming more and more into your power, into your sovereignty, just focusing on yourself. And I know that can be difficult if you're a mum, if you're in relationship with other people, it can be very challenging. And it's the most important focus, is to focus on yourself, because you can't help anybody else until you help yourself and start to shift these patterns. Notice what common storylines are coming up. The more consciously aware that you become about this, you'll start to say, oh, hey, here we go again. I recognize that. I'm doing that again. And I'm seeing it with different perspective, with different eyes, with a different belief system about myself, because I'm changing my narrative. I am worth it. And I really feel that. This is not just a lip service, you know, this is going deeper. So tomorrow, when we've got resonant serpents, we've got Leo moon at that time, of course, depending on where you are in the world. And we've got Mercury joining the Sun in Sagittarius. So we've got a potentiality for huge optimism at this time of year, building up, of course, to the darkest night on the 21st of December. So all the religious ceremonies aside, remember that we're going into the dark now. We're going into a darker and darker place until the light starts to return on the 21st of December, when we have the winter solstice. On Thursday in the US, we have Thanksgiving Day. And again, we've got Leo moon. Get ready for a light bulb. It's white galactic world bridger. So get ready to jettison that old world. And this is a very big step for Sagittarius energy as well. An expansion, it's Jupiter day on Thursday, and Sagittarius, of course, is ruled by Jupiter, so ever expansive and optimistic can be energy. And so Mercury is also conjoining the South Node in Sagittarius. And so it's recognizing that a lot of these storylines that we've been living are our ancestor storylines. We came here to understand and apprentice and know that, okay, I understand this is how my family is in terms of our human being family. This is how we came to be in this place because of all these previous incarnations and experiences. And now I'm the one in the family that's going to go into a different adventure, have a different belief, and keep the wisdom of my ancestors and let go of the pain body story. So a really magical day. On Friday, we have the Gateway Day on the 26th. That's blue solar hand. Again, still Leo moon. And we have got Saturn at 8 degrees in Aquarius, sextiling Chiron at 8 degrees in Aries. So again, that number 8, Scorpio, infinity, as above, so below. And so what's coming in around that new age of Horus, being an independent, interdependent human being and society, free of codependency, different storyline, different belief system, and incarnating that. So all of this, you know, we are initiating now. And then coming into the weekend, it's going to be a really fantastic energy as well, depending on where each of us are in our own personal storyline. That's the key. And of course, we've got this Venus shadow here now. So we're starting to really get into the groove of what's practical, what's grounded, what's seeking to be released about the patriarchy. And of course, people coming into their healed, sacred, masculine, free of the wounding story. That's massive. In terms of what's happening with later on in the month, on the 29th of November, so not much later on, it seems to be going really fast this month, that's when there's going to be a really huge shift in terms of the storyline. So whatever we're doing right now, tapping, if you know how to tap, if you don't, go and check it out. Emofree.com is Gary Craig's website. He's the founder. All these triggers, all this storyline, we're ready. The universe is ready for us to let go of that. It does depend on our inner work and our discipline and determination. Venus, grow up and take full responsibility, recognizing that people who we trusted in corporate, in power, have led us a merry dance, let's say that. And so we're leaving this story behind. So just notice where you were on the planet back in 2003, what was going on for you then. Look at that huge journey that you've been on up until now. And remember that as the North Node goes into Taurus, the next cycle is going to be in Taurus. So the more you do this inner work now at the inner work time of the year, the more that you are going to manifest a new completely new story of yourself, which you may not even be aware of on any level. And I think that's very much the energy that's coming up in the next few months. Keep the faith in yourself, keep working on yourself, and that's got to be the core essence now, as it always is at this time of year. So we've got 19 is the key number, 19 December for Venus going retrograde in Capricorn. 19th of May is going to be the start of the next cycle. And if you want to join me to really work with this Venus and Capricorn energy beginning on the 19th, the next cycle of 52 days starts on the 14th of December. All these numbers, all these figures and etc. I'm really going to be focusing on the end in mind, the goal in mind, and where we want to be. Even though we may not have the answers yet, we may not know where we want to live on the planet, it's really getting into a focus of we know what is truth, we know what's good for us, and even though we may not know all of that, we're starting to remember that and let go of what is toxic in relationship for us, what is poisonous, Scorpio, and everybody is starting to really wake up to new ways of being on the planet. So I'll put a link below for you. I can only do a small group of women because I work with women because I am a woman. I work with women who have similar patterns to me. That's how it works. And so if you're in your 50s, if you are ready to do this deep work and you're going to be committed to it, then please do get in touch with me and we can co-create over 52 days on such a powerful level. You don't need to know anything about astrology. It'll be helpful as well if you do, but you don't need to know. You don't need to know anything about the Mayan calendar. What you need to be able to do is to look at yourself and your shadow story and be committed to doing whatever is necessary on a healing level to let go of the past and the emotions in order to rewire the amygdala. So lots of love with your blue storm and your ability to be in your center. It's all good. Remember that, even though sometimes it feels really, really challenging, remember it's always a replay of an old story. And as boring as it sounds, you know what your story is and you've lived it your whole life, and it is about that. So the more you come into reverence for yourself and your own personal story and your own personal power struggles, becoming consciously aware of those, that's what consciousness is, that's what transcendence is, and healing takes you into a totally different clear space that will add to whatever meditation practices you're doing, whatever calming practices you're doing. Once you get a hold of your mind and listen to it and hear what your inner child is ready to heal, and you've got the tools to do that, then that's when the magic happens. So lots of love. I wish you an amazing Thanksgiving and a whole journey into the heart of yourself. Lots of love. Bye for now.